Oh, how are you? I am doing quite well. It's been still very hot. It's been about a week, and I think the weather has been over 100 degrees every day. So it has been a lot of time inside. Haven't been spending much time outside. It is nice to look outside, but it's quite hot. It is pretty warm. So I'm just enjoying a little bit of, I suppose it's dessert, but just a chance to sit still after dinner and drink a very nice cold beer in this awesome stein. It says, it's got my name on it, and it says Deo Optimo Maximo, to the best and greatest God. It's quite good, very refreshing. And my wife made some muffins last night, so I'm just enjoying one, and they're very good. Blueberry and lemon, I think. Anyway, I'm realizing, I suppose it's been about a month since we looked at this last, but when we looked at Wind in the Willows last, we got to look at this new edition with illustrations by Chris Dunn, his watercolors. And we didn't see very much, so I thought I might take you through some of that, and then we could read a little bit more. My son and I are still reading through this, and I'm sure you know the sensation, but when you're reading a book with someone else and your reading pace is a little bit faster than theirs, and all you want to do is read ahead. Well, that's been my experience with my son. He's quite young, and so we make our way through this very slowly. So I actually already read through it, and I'm reading back through it again, just myself, and then he and I are carrying on every time where we end. So anyway, but I thought we could look at this again. So again, here's the cover. Really wonderful picture of mole and rat on the water, and then a nice image of Toad Hall from the back there. And these end papers are really nice. I like what they did. Here's Toad. You can see he's about to or he's in the midst of a speech. And then Mole. It looks like he must be in the library at Toad Hall. But this copy also has several of Chris Dunn's sketches that he did. A bunch of portraits. Here's some of Rat. I like this one here where he's got the basket. And then here's some from their episode in the Dark Wood. And Badger. Badger is my son's favorite. The quiet and dignified old Mr. Badger. And then our good friend Toad here. There's some others. And you really must get a copy of this to look through all of those. But why don't we look through some of these? We'll kind of do this backwards. Oh, this is a good one. But here's the very end, the feast at Toad Hall. And let's see. Oh, this is good. The return of Ulysses here. Which of course all of us adults understand the reference from Homer's Odyssey, when Ulysses, comes back home and he's found that his home has been overtaken by suitors who all think he's dead and are trying to convince his wife Penelope of that fact so she'll marry them. And he cleans house, to put it lightly. I quite like that one. He's got several of these. Oh, and here's that picture that I've actually got a print of this hanging on the wall. Let's find another here. Now, if you'll remember, Rat has a moment in chapter 9, Wayfarers All, where he hears the call of the sea again. See, we talked about this last time, actually. And this really incredible picture of this sea rat. Just a marvelous watercolor by Chris Dunn. Just really incredible. Boy, let's see. He has some, Chris Dunn has some very good ones. Here's a good one. This is in, I believe this is in, yeah, there we go. This is in Mole's house. Rat and Mole getting his house put in order to enjoy a nice Christmas. He has some really excellent watercolors with this really great architecture. You see this church building and Mole and Rat walking along in the snow. Incredible. Anyway, let's see if we can't find one more. There are so many in here, but all right, I like this one. In the dark wood, Mole and Rat find their way, and they hit this door scraper, which of course necessitates the presence of a door. And here's Badger in his pajamas on his nice green door. Looks a bit like Bag End, honestly. But anyway, incredible artwork in here, and he's got something on at least every other page, and sometimes on all consecutive pages. So just a numerous amount of pictures there by Chris Dunn. And I thought we could read a little bit here. And this is actually where my son and I have left off last. But it's about Toad in jail. He steals a motor car, gets sentenced to jail, and he's sitting there, and we meet him there, and he's quite pitiful, very repentant, of course. And the funny thing about Toad is anytime he's in trouble, he's always repentant. And then it's usually short-lived. As soon as he's out of trouble and he gets a little bit of his confidence back, he switches back and becomes his old mischievous self. And in some way, it's fun to read it as an adult, because you of course understand how, just pick one thing that you do that you don't necessarily like that you do it, and how many times have you tried to stop and you just always kind of go back to that old failing, that old sin. And so as an adult, we can kind of chuckle and laugh at Toad's failing because we realize how much like us Toad is in that regard. But in some way, Toad is the worst, morally speaking, the worst character in The Wind in the Willows, even more so than the Chief Weasel and the bad animals. I suppose they really are bad, but he is really in some way worse than them because he's so wretchedly immature. He has I mean, horrible spending habits. You see this, he changes hobbies all the time. I think you go through in the very beginning of Wind in the Willows, he kind of goes through narratively through 3 hobbies, or 4, I suppose. It was boating, punting, his gypsy cart, his canary cart, and then cars. He moves on to cars. Anyway, he's really very immature, and he has horrible spending habits, and he's loud and boisterous and rude, all the while professing that he's the very soul of politeness and gentility. And he takes all of his friends for granted. He misuses his good name, his money, and his friends. All the things that he ought to value most in life, he doesn't treasure in the slightest. So in that way, he's really the worst. And how like him we often are. Anyway, it's really quite fun because even at the end of the story, he's brought to this kind of pseudo repentance. And in the very last little bit at his party, you're kind of left with, is he really reformed or not? So it's really quite funny. When it's ourselves, it's less funny, but when it's someone else, it's quite funny. It makes it easy to forgive other people their failings when you're familiar with your own. Anyway, thought we should read some of this. Now this is chapter 8, Toad's Adventures. Here's poor Toad in his cell. When Toad found himself immured in a dank and noisome dungeon, he knew that all the grim darkness of a medieval fortress lay between him and the outer world of sunshine and well-metalled high roads where he had lately been so happy. Disporting himself as if he had bought up every road in England, he flung himself at full length on the floor and shed bitter tears, and abandoned himself to dark despair. "This is the end of everything," he said. "At least it is the end of the career of Toad, which is the same thing. The popular and handsome Toad, the rich and hospitable Toad, the Toad so free and careless and debonair. How can I hope to be ever set at large again," he said, "who have been imprisoned so justly for stealing so handsome a motor car in such an audacious manner, and for such lurid and imaginative cheek bestowed upon such a number of fat, red-faced policemen." Here his chokes sobbed him. "Stupid animal that I was," he said. "Now I must languish in this dungeon till people who were proud to say they knew me have forgotten the very name of Toad. Oh, wise old badger," he said. "Oh, clever, intelligent rat and sensible mole, what sound judgments, what a knowledge of men and matters you possess. Oh, unhappy and forsaken Toad." With such lamentations such as these, he passed his days and nights for several weeks, refusing his meals or intermediate light refreshments, though the grim and ancient jailer knew that Toad's pockets were well lined, and frequently pointed out that many comforts, and indeed luxuries, could by arrangement be sent in at a price from outside. And then we go on, and the jailer's daughter takes an interest in the pitiful Toad because she has a soft spot for animals. There's one other part here. She tries to cheer Toad up with food, which actually works, and results in this wonderful, well, we'll just read it and I can talk about it after. When the girl returned, the jailer's daughter returned, some hours later, she carried a tray with a cup of fragrant tea steaming on it, and a plate piled up with very hot buttered toast cut thick, very brown on both sides, with the butter running through the holes in it in great golden drops, like honey from the honeycomb. The smell of that buttered toast simply talked to Toad, and with no uncertain voice. Talked of warm kitchens, of breakfasts on bright, frosty mornings, of cozy parlor firesides on winter evenings, when one's ramble was over and slippered feet were propped on the fender, of the purring of contented cats and the twitter of sleepy canaries. Toad sat up, on end once more, dried his eyes, sipped his tea, and munched his toast, and soon began talking freely about himself and the house he lived in, and his doings there, and how important he was, and what a lot his friends thought of him. That's really quite a splendid little episode. In this, in this, Toad finds himself immured in a dark, dank, and noisome dungeon, with all the weight of a medieval fortress bearing down upon him. And in this blackness, he has this bright moment, and it's this plate of simple food, buttered toast and tea. And it made me think of other occasions like that in every adventure story, really. I'm trying to think of one that doesn't have it. But it's easy. We think about, like, in Dante's comedy, after he's gone through the very deepest parts of the Inferno, he comes up to the surface, and the first thing he does before continuing to the next challenge is he washes. He has this moment of refreshment. In the voyage of the Dawn Treader, Lucy finds this spell in the magician's library, a spell for the refreshment of the spirit, kind of partway through the adventure. In Lord of the Rings, this actually happens several times, but the stay at Crick Hollow is kind of the first. After they've been stalked a little bit by the Black Riders, and they make it to Crick Hollow, and they have this Sabbath moment, this moment of rest and safety and good food. They have that at Crick Hollow, and then they continue, and then they have, after the horrors of Old Man Willow, they have the same thing at the house of Tom Bombadil, heed no nightly noises. And then, Rivendell, and on and on and on, until the very end. I was thinking just how interesting that is, that theme shows up so much, that there's this Sabbath moment in adventures, that there's this necessity in adventure stories for when the hero, the character, whoever it might be, is embarking on this adventure, and as soon as they've had as much as they think they could maybe handle, something happens and they get their break. And then they go on and they find that, one, they can continue to go on, and two, that they can actually handle far worse horrors, far worse evils. Anyway, I thought that was interesting. Thank you for stopping by and looking at that with me again. I'm glad we got to look at some more of that artwork. If you haven't picked up a copy, pick up a copy of The Wind in the Willows with the Shepherd illustrations first, and then get a copy of Chris Dunn's illustrations. They're really fantastic. The past 2 years, I've been in a watercolor rut for whatever reason, and so his watercolor images are quite pleasant to look at, and very much enhance this additional reading of Wind in the Willows. So thanks for stopping by and sitting with me for a moment. And cheers.